this is Inmaculada Pineda from the University of Malaga, and today I'm presenting my second video lesson for the training program for CLIL teachers in Taiwan. Today we're going to have a look at CLIL and multiliteracy. Enjoy! Hello again, this is Inmaculada Pineda from the University of Malaga, and today I'm going to be talking about CLIL and multiliteracies. So let's get started. Now, multimodal communication, as we saw in our previous video, is using more than one mode to create meaning and one or several media as tools or resources to combine those modes. So basically, this girl here is studying science, CLIL science, and she is paying attention to a poster. So the poster is the medium. And the modes here are drawings and text and colors and arrows and position on screen, etc. So those are the different modes on just one medium. Okay? I'm sure you can notice. Now, transpositional grammar is the theory that tries to explain how different modes can make meaning. Okay, transpositional grammar pays attention to both forms of meaning and functions. So in this case we have, as we saw before, textual, visual, spatial, gestural, and oral modes. This is from the theory in 2001 by the New London Group, and particularly Calantzis, Kress and Calantzis. And then later on in 2015 they decided to increase the number of modes by having linguistic and tactile. And then those modes can be implemented in forms. So the textual mode is implemented in text, the visual mode is implemented in image, the spatial mode is implemented in space or location, proximity, etc. The gestural mode is implemented in body form or in facial expression, gaze, etc. The oral form is implemented in sounds or music, and then eventually linguistic mode is implemented in speech, and the tactile mode has to do with how we express, for example, in sculpture. So when we touch objects and they have specific textures, for example, those also have meaning. Now, the functions of those modes have to do with reference or the representational function. Basically, what is this about? What is this mode about? And then agency has to do with the social function, and basically it has to answer the question of who is doing this mode, who has the agency, who is creating this meaning. Then the structure or the organizational function has to do with what holds the meaning together. What holds the message together? How is it structured? How is it organized? Then the context function or the contextual function has to do with what else is the meaning connected to. So if the message is also connected to other elements in the room or in the geographical context or the cultural context, how is it connected? Okay, what else is connected to, and how is it connected? And then the interest or the ideological function has to do with what is this message or this mode for? What are the intentions behind this message or the intentions behind this meaning? Okay. This is a table in which you can have the different functions here. the representational, social, organizational, and then those are divided into the different modes. Remember, these are the relatively old modes, the 5 original ones. And so, for example, the representational function in the linguistic mode can be expressed through naming and name giving. Okay? If you would like to have a larger explanation on the 5 questions towards a multimodal grammar, or the functional grammar that is proposed by Kress and Calances, I strongly recommend you to visit this website. I have the link, direct link here. Okay? Now, when we are teaching students how to read and write, when we're teaching students how to be competent users of a language, particularly in terms of texts, we talk about literacy. We talk about how we teach learners to decode textual messages. Now, if we are teaching specific content, for example, if we're teaching math or science or technology, or if we are teaching art, or if we are teaching music, we talk about content-specific literacy. This means that there's a way of using language that is specific to a particular content. So this is why we say that, for example, doctors speak in a specific way, in a certain way that is distinct or different from other people in society. This is why we say that, for example, the language of science or the language of art is different. And so this is when we are teaching content to our students, we are also teaching them content-specific literacy. When we are teaching our students either language or content in a specific culture, we say that we're teaching them a culture-specific literacy. Basically, we are teaching them to decode messages in our culture. And those messages might not be present in other cultures, or may have different meanings in other cultures. Now, when we are teaching our students through multimodal communication, we talk about multimodal literacy, or the theory that has been developed into the educational part of multimodal communication, which is multiliteracies. So there's this theory about how to introduce, how to help our students become proficient in decoding and producing messages that are multimodal. So when we have multiliteracy, basically we are teaching our students to be able to decode messages in different modes, and also because this is a CLIL classroom, we're also teaching them to decode messages in different languages, basically in our native language. In your case is Mandarin Chinese, in my case is Spanish, but also in the target language, of course, which in our cases is both English. Now, when you are designing your multi-literacy projects for your classes, you need to be aware of what we call the pedagogical repertoire. The pedagogical repertoire has to do with the different ways in which you can use modes and combine modes so that your students are using different cognitive processes so that they are either experiencing, and this is what we call authentic literacy through multimodality, or they are conceptualizing, and this is called the didactic literacy. And then they might be maybe analyzing a product or a process or a concept, and this is called functional literacy. And then the most difficult but also most interesting to use in the CLIL classroom is teaching students to apply knowledge into some process or some sequence of activities or something, and this is called the transformative literacy. All of those four literacies are part of what I was telling you before, the multiliteracies theory, that has to do with the implementation of multimodal pedagogy or pedagogical approaches to your CLIL teaching. As I said, the transformative literacy is the most difficult to do, but it's also the most interesting. Okay, this is just a graph showing the different literacies, different pedagogical repertoire sections within the multiliteracies approach. And in situated practice, students are immersed in the experience of the text and different discourses. They are learning unfamiliar maybe concepts or terms or ideas. They are learning new vocabulary. Normally here you have longer explanations, you have longer intervention by the teacher. Then if you're doing overt instruction, students are systematic, they are analytical and conscious about the form of the text. Again, remember, the text doesn't have to be literally a text. It can be oral communication, or it can be combination of text and graphs or pictures or images. And they use multiliteracies meta language. Basically, they are engaging in producing meanings using more than one mode in this case. Okay? Now, with critical framing, students are interpreting the world. They are interpreting maybe social differences or cultural differences, and they are creating meanings in the text. And again, the text doesn't have to be literally words on paper. And students view a text or a message maybe critically in relation to its context. And then the transformed practice, again, this is the most interesting part, is when students are able to transfer meaning making to other texts or contexts. Basically, they are creating new meanings and they are learning in creative ways. So this is, as I said, it's the most interesting part. I have another video lesson in which I am discussing how you can teach students to become proficient meaning makers in multimodal communication, so I'm not going to stop here today. Now let's move on to the tools that you can use to promote the use of a multiliteracies approach in the classroom. You can use YouTube or Vimeo or TikTok. Basically, those are video repositories where you can find clips that can be interesting for your students, maybe because of content, also because of agents who are conveying the meaning. So basically, if you show videos in which kids their age, maybe from other countries, are discussing something, this is normally very interesting for them. As in my previous video lesson, you can use presentation software, PowerPoint, Prezi. I included this another one, Keynote, which is for Mac. So if you're a Mac user, maybe you prefer Keynote. Then video edition software, I was telling you about all of those in my previous video. And then for other tools, you can use Canva. Canva it's a very interesting design tool that has lots and lots and lots of templates and stickers and designs that you can use not only for your PowerPoints, but also in case you're creating videos or posters or infographics. They help you a lot because you don't need to be a graphic designer to create relatively high quality multimedia materials. Okay, so this is very interesting. Then there's this website that I would like to mention. It's called the CLIL Store. The CLIL Store is a repository, and I have the link to the CLIL Store here in case you're interested. And it's my presentation is interactive, so as you can see, you can click once you consult it, you can click and it will direct you to the website. It's a repository where CLIL teachers have included not only video clips that they have used for their lessons, but the actual lesson plans, how they used it in the classrooms, with details about sequencing and activities and vocabulary and whatnot. It's very, very interesting. So I would strongly recommend you to use it. Okay? In terms of the multimodal elements that you can use to foster multiliteracy among your students, I would like to show you this video. This video is from The Lion King, and it's a good way to ask your students to reflect on how music can change the message of the same video. So if we play the video, let's see. You can see Okay, so now I have the activities that I'm proposing for you to do in the lesson for today. The first task is for you to have a group discussion reflecting on the lesson plan you designed for my first video session. So the lesson plan you did for me in my first video session. I want you to consider which parts of the pedagogy of multiliteracies were you using. You might not be aware that you were using transformative literacy or analyzing literacy, but in this case, when you go back and reflect on what you have designed, you were using part of this multiliteracy's pedagogical repertoire for sure. So try to think about which parts you were using, why you were using those, how you were using those, and to what purpose. And then the second question would be, would it be possible to combine the pedagogy of multiliteracies with other methodologies and models that you may be using in your classroom? So is it possible to combine pedagogy of multiliteracies with, for example, communicative teaching or project-based learning, task-based learning, any of the other methodologies that you might be using in your classrooms? If it's possible, and you think it's possible, how is it possible? How would you actually implement the combination of different pedagogical approaches in your classroom? Okay, so this is the first task, which is a discussion. And then the second task, yes, you guessed, it's again, design a lesson plan for your CLIL course in which you develop a transformed practice methodological approach. Okay, so basically you are using the transformative literacy approach into your CLIL classroom. Some of you might have done it before in the previous session without knowing, but I want you to, if you did, then you need to design a new lesson plan in which you again use the transformed practice. But most likely you didn't, and this is why I want you to do it today. Okay, you should work again in groups of 2 and 3, preferably teachers who have similar content courses as yours, but not necessarily. You can group up as a whatever you want. Okay, my CLIL tip on multiliteracy. whenever you can, try horizontal coordination. So if there are more CLIL teachers in your institution, try creating a CLIL teaching team. Try establishing regular meetings so that you can share materials, co-create materials, share tips and whatnot, and maybe have group therapy. I would also strongly recommend you to have not only horizontal coordination with content teachers, but also with English language teachers. This is essential for the success of the CLIL implementation in your school. Try to get English teachers involved in the bilingual education program. For example, by asking them to maybe introduce some of the vocabulary that will be needed for your lessons in their lessons, or maybe some of the structural linguistic forms that you will need for your lessons, maybe the use of the future or the simple present, etc. You can also collaborate with international CLIL projects. There is, here in Europe, there's one that's eTwinning CLIL project, and they have international connections. So even though it is European project, it has connections with Thailand, for example, Singapore, etc. So I'm sure you can join some of the eTwinning groups. Also, an easy way to have contact with other CLIL professionals is by joining Facebook groups, particularly. There's one here that I'm suggesting. It's actually the one I belong to, so you can post questions, materials, worries and concerns. I mean, it's really, really helpful. And when there are publications or new videos about CLIL, they also post them here, so it's very interesting. Well, thank you again for listening. As you know, this is my email address in case you have questions or comments, or maybe you would like to consult with me. I have a number of references that I strongly recommend to check, particularly this one, which is a very interesting article about media theory and semiotics in terms of multiliteracy theory. Thank you.